Hello, Strata Loungers. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge, and today is an amazing day. Uh, I bring you good tidings of great joy that shall be for all conservatives. Uh, we've we've got them. We've got them. I've been looking for a week and 2 days now for the smoking gun evidence that is incontrovertible in every way. I've spent uh, I've spent 8 days tracking down data, leads, things that look like they might be airtight. Found some holes in some things, others just completely false and fraudulent. All of this stuff has been really disheartening. Tracking down all these things that all these people, rumors and all this stuff. But I know how to read evidence. I've gotten really good at it. And about 2 hours ago, I saw. I mean, it's a smoking gun. It is incontrovertible, and the best part about it is incontrovertible using their numbers, using the official election numbers. Data analysis of the usual election numbers show us not only irregularities, but they show us almost amazingly clear statistical irregularities. I'm going to go through all of that for you, and none of it is mine. And I will basically going to preview what I'm going to do on part 2 of the stolen election, which I'm going to call the smoking gun. And I saw it and I loved it. So we're going to get going with that, and we're going to spend most of our time on that. I'll just saw this hour and 10-minute tape by this remarkable patriot, and before we do that, I'll just show you a couple of the quick little animations. Then we'll get into the meat of this thing, because these things actually do go on kind of concurrently. First of all, let me say welcome. I know that you don't need to be a member to be a Strata Lounger, but we've gained 1,000 members in the last week, and it's been tremendous. So in any event, if you're one of the new members and you haven't been here before, welcome. The Strata Loungers are kind of they're like the Republican Guard, I guess, of the Bill Whittle .com fan club. But if you're one of the new members, it's great to be here, and that is the difference between this business being slight, ongoing, perpetual, slight economic decline that's been taking my life savings into one that's more like it's a slight upward slope. Imagine that. So that's great. And so anyway, let's get to just a couple of fun little things. I'm just going to show you a couple of quick things. We'll probably do another update on the whole science fiction messaging thing, but that's looking real good in a lot of other ways too. But since I had a few days there between the election and the previous finishing of the America's Forgotten Heroes, which was delayed in terms of release, they were going to release on October 31st, but turns out there's other news. So that's good too. But I did manage to get a couple little things done, and not too much. Although I have to say the third one's pretty cool. So one of the things that I'm trying to get done, the scale of just the working next on a 3-minute tech demo, which we will use to go and get investors for, because we're not talking about we're talking about a kind of a for-profit intellectual property now, yeah, that's exactly right. Tim Morris USA says, I don't know if he's talking about me or everybody, but it went from despair to rage to an almost smug sense of confidence, like, we got you, you sons of bitches, we got you. That's how I'm feeling, and that's how you'll be feeling too when you're done. This shirt is from Yellowstone National Park. I don't know what it means, but that's where it's from. It's probably printed in China, and it probably means round-eyed white devil. In any event, so let me just show you just a couple little tests. So again, I want to stress the first two are simply motion lighting tests, but I'm trying to get a look for kind of the visual style for this universe, and and I wanted it to look really beat up. So I'll just run this a couple times. You can tell me what you think. So this is, oh, that's loud. This is like this gigantic, big, nasty, ugly ship. I just wanted to do kind of a lighting test and a, you know, that kind of thing. And here's, this again is not, this next one is not so much artistically inspired as I just wanted to get a look. I got two other vehicles that are in the same, made by the same company called Sparta. And so here are three of them, and you can see they're different sizes, but they all look like they're made by the same company. So Sparta is just this kind of, like really kind of, you know, is Sam, oh, what's his name? Who's the guy who always plays the cowboy? Here's the first one again. It's not Sam Neill, it's Sam Elliott. These are the kind of vehicles that Sam Elliott would do the introduction for. So the one in the front left is the Scorpius, the near one is the Delphinus, and the big one's the Centaurus. And the ad for the Centaurus is famously, I'll just play it one more time, she slides through the atmosphere with all the grace and elegance of a canned ham. I just love it. So we tried to find a clean one for the commercials, but we couldn't find any clean ones. So I got one more to show you, and this next one's really pretty badass. The big ship, the Scorpius, I did some stuff on this. Those two were in 3D Studio Max. This next one is rendered in Unreal. And feast your eyes on this baby. I love that shot. I believe I'll run that again. I always have to go to another video in order to get it to restart. There we go. The guys in the cockpit are what makes it. And I realize it's a flashback to 2001. It's that red lit cockpit. It does something. It puts it right over the top. And it's a big, nasty, ugly piece of iron, this thing. We're doing some final work on it. But I just love it. I love that shot. And I love the scale. Yes, here's the flyby again. Mobile Moto says very alien. That's exactly the look we're looking for. We're looking for that kind of Nostromo look, you know, just this massive, big, nasty, ugly, cool-looking ship. Yeah, sorry, mic's a little hot. I'll turn that down. Give me a second here. So, so there's that. Yeah, let me turn my mic down a bit. It's a high-quality problem after all the other problems we've had here. One sec, sorry. Find this thing right there. Input, and let's go back to me. Let me just get this mic turned down just a wee bit. Yeah, that should be better. I'll show it to you one more time, just this last one more time. I love it. Now I'm using all these motion capture files. They're the same files, so some of them look pretty familiar after you get to them for a while. I've got like 60, so you basically have to pick ones and then time them and move them around. But in any event, I just really like that a lot. All right, so here we go. I am going to run some stuff for you guys that you are just gonna love. So it's hang on, let's get his last name. So it's a Dr. Shiva is an Indian American and as opposed to an American Indian. And he is he's an MIT grad, PhD engineer running for Congress in the great state of Massachusetts. And when he saw some irregularities in Massachusetts, he said maybe there's irregularities elsewhere. And he just put together the most amazing hour and 10 minutes I've ever seen. I will link that in the description. And so what I'm going to do now, I am going to turn the mic back up a little bit. Okay, hang on, we'll split the difference. We got to get the mics exactly right here. And that's where we're going with it. So there we go. So There you go. Now that's where we're going. Adjust your sound accordingly. So this Dr. Shiva took. There's so much to say, and I'm so delighted. I just saw it. I just saw it a little over an hour ago, and it's just it is the smoking gun. Now he took an hour and 10 minutes to do the presentation, and this is where yours truly actually comes in useful. I realized a long time ago that the only thing I'm really good at is taking complicated things and making them simple. I'm just barely smart enough to understand this stuff, and then if I can just barely understand it, I can make it simpler and clearer and easier for everybody else to understand. So his hour and 10-minute presentation goes into a lot of detail. I'm not going to go into that kind of detail, but I will get the guts of it to you, and I'll probably be able to do that a little more clearly than he did. So let's get started, shall we? I'm going to just check some notes because I'm going to write this is going to, excuse me, while I put on my reading spectacles. This is going into the second of the stolen election firewalls called Smoking Gun. Okay, so let's start with something here. When your vote is counted, whether it's a paper ballot or anything like that. Now, hand-counted votes are different, but generally speaking, in large areas, what's it called again? Okay, so let's say you go and you're at a voting place and you fill out your little bubbles and stuff or whatever, and then it goes into a machine, and the machine takes a picture of it, and that ballot is the ballot image, and that's what actually gets counted. It's not the piece of paper that gets counted, it's the photograph of the piece of paper that gets counted. And that photograph is then sent to a counting center where they count the things electronically. So basically, if I fill in all my dots and I hand it to the people, it goes into a machine, scans those things. This is for much of the voting systems. They're all different everywhere, and we're going to talk about electronic voting, all the rest of that stuff. But even on a hand-filled out ballot, it goes into a machine, the machine takes a picture of it, and then that picture goes to be counted. That's called a ballot image. Federal law says that those ballot images need to be kept for 22 months. And the ballots, the actual paper ballots that the ballot image is derived from, are usually kept for 22 months. But the first thing that this amazing man found out was when he went, because he is running for office. He didn't think that the way the votes were turning out matched what he had expected. So he said, let me see the ballot images in Massachusetts. And they've been destroyed. And they said that there is a last-minute law passed in many states saying that you could destroy the ballot image once it's been counted. They're using this little loophole to say, well, no, we're still keeping the ballots. We've still got the ballots like we're supposed to, but we just destroyed the images. Once they were counted, we destroyed the images. Well, the image is the ballot, you see, because they're not counting ballots. They're counting images of the ballots. And now in many places where they've counted these ballot images, they've deleted them. Fraudulently and illegally, they've deleted them. They're gone. So the first thing that this guy said was, and this is nothing compared to what's coming, evidence-wise, but the first thing he said is, look, if you don't know the input, if you have an input and the input goes into the machine and then you can get an output, and if the input's reliable, you can get a reliable output. This isn't the same as garbage in, garbage out. In other words, if we have an election and we know that 50 people are voting in this election, we know for a certain fact that there are going to be 50 voters, then the total number of votes coming out of the machine should total 50. Maybe somebody gets 30 votes and somebody gets 20. Maybe somebody gets 49 votes and somebody gets 1. But we know that the output is reliable because we know what the input is. If we know that there are 50 voters, then however the votes break out, they've got a total 50 votes. But if you don't know how many votes are going in, then there's no way to certify the number of votes that are coming out. In other words, if I don't know how many votes are going in, and I say one guy got 50 votes and another guy got 70 votes, it looks like he won. Well, you can't prove that that's fraud or anything unless you knew that there were only 50 votes in the first place. So just the fact that there's no permanent voter registration, no permanent ID, the whole mail-in thing, nobody knows how many ballots are going in. And since nobody knows how many ballots are going into the system, no one can look at the outputs and say, yes, that matches. If 1 million people voted, and we knew exactly that 1 million people voted, and Joe Biden won the election 1 million to 0, you could look at that data and see whether or not it was fraudulent. But if you don't know how many ballots are going in, then Trump could get 1 million ballots and Biden could get 4 million. There's no way to know without knowing the total number of votes counted. So that's the initial problem. That's how you get away with this. But that's not the data. That's not the smoking gun. The smoking gun is coming up. It's just brutal. Now, I am going to refine these charts a little bit. He's going to get full credit. His name is going to be on everything because this is not me at all. I am just going to show you the case that he made. So stay with me here because it's not going to require really a whole lot of math, but the way he's got it laid out, I think it can be improved on just a little bit. So let's start with picture number 1. Okay, there they are, the two patriots who've come up with this. So here's what happens. In many places, including in Michigan, all of this data is for Michigan. There are 2 ways to vote, legally 2 ways to vote. You can vote individually. In other words, I vote for Trump for president, then you go down the ballot and you do that. Or you can elect to go all Democrat or all Republican. That is a legal way to vote in many precincts, in many counties, many states. So you can basically just say, oh, look, I don't want to waste any time. I'm just going to vote Republican. And if you vote Republican, it goes all the way down the ticket Republican and so on. Now, some people do that and other people go down the ballot individually. Most people go down the ballot individually. But I want you to take a look at this chart here. Again, I would do this a little bit differently, but in any event, if you look at the red line that's at 0%, that red line represents what the straight party ticket votes. So if you were to get nothing but people who voted all Republican, didn't do the individual votes, just went all ticket Republicans, that straight line would be the straight Republican Party score for people who vote Republican. And they're not making a choice on Donald Trump on this. This is the important part to understand. That red line represents people who go in and vote Republican down the ticket. Now, anything above that line, in the case of the blue dot, it's 5% above the line. That blue dot is a blue square is a precinct, and that precinct is showing 5% above the line. What that means is that for that particular precinct, 5% of the people who went down individually voted for Donald Trump heavier than the straight Republican vote. In other words, the best way to think of that is that 5% above the line represents Democrats or independents who may have voted differently, may have voted Democrat, but switched their vote just for Trump. So anything that's above that red line is Trump doing better than straight down the ticket Republican, automatic all Republican vote. Anything below that line is Trump doing worse than straight Republican vote. So any data point above that red line can be interpreted to mean that that represents people who may have voted Democrat but made a vote for Trump and so on. And likewise, if it's below the line, that could represent Republicans who went in there and voted Republicans except for Trump. And this is the case that Romney and the others are trying to make, is that Trump lost because Republicans lost faith in him and they just didn't vote for him. So anything above that line is a net gain over the straight 50-50 vote, which is the red line. So the red line is how people vote. I'm a Republican. That's what the line is. People who decide to fill in their own vote. If there are more people who vote for Trump than just the straight Republican votes, you get above the line. If less people, then below the line. Now begins the fun. So, looking at this data, each one of those blue squares is a precinct. This would be a normal case situation. In other words, in a completely unfraudulent vote count, this is what you would expect to see. The numbers across the bottom, by the way, are the percentage of Republican votes. So on the far left of the margin, that far left blue dot, that means what, maybe 5% of the votes went to the Republicans and 95 went to the Democrats. But of the 5% that went Republican, some 2% of them went higher to Trump than just straight Republican. But in any event, this is what a normal case would look like. This should be pretty clear. Some are above the line, some are below the line. That's a normal deviation. That's what we'd expect to see. If you saw this, what this would tell you is that Trump is more popular than the average Republican votes. In other words, people who go in and vote just Republican vote the red line, but the blue dots above the red line means lots of people have gone in and voted up and down, different ways, but voted for Trump. This is what Democrats voting for Trump would look like. This is what it would look like if Democrats went out to vote, went straight ticket Democrat, except went to Donald Trump specifically for that particular thing. So this is what the graph would look like if Donald Trump was more popular among independents and had pulled a lot of Democratic votes. Inversely, if Mitt Romney's case were true, that people have lost faith in Donald Trump, then Donald Trump would be underperforming among Republicans. In other words, the average Republican down the ticket vote is the red line, but blue dots below the red line would mean that Republicans are actually leaving Donald Trump. They are voting for Biden. They're voting straight Republican ticket, but the blue dots mean they're voting for Biden. And the lower those dots are, the further away they are. So, for example, if you look at the one on the far right, bottom right-hand corner of the blue dots, that looks like roughly a 70% Republican majority. Look at the bottom line, bottom scale. If you look at the far right, bottom right-hand corner dot, that precinct is showing about 75% of the votes going to the Republicans. That's what the horizontal line means. But of the 75% of the Republican votes that were counted in that precinct won 75-25. But of the Republican votes in that bottom right-hand precinct, 10% of them were below. In other words, 10% of the voters who voted, not the automatic ticket, said, no, we don't like Trump. If those dots had been above the line, then they would like Trump. Okay, so that's how it works. Now let's look at some of the data coming back from Michigan. And I hope you're all sitting down because this just gets to be marvelous. These guys analyzed the data from the 4 most populous counties in Michigan. That'd be Oakland County, Macomb County, Kent County, and Wayne County. They took a look at the actual data that came in both as early voting and on election day. So now prepare to have your minds blown. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Before I go to the next graph, this has to be clearly understood by everyone that this is not a projection. This is a point-by-point indication of the data that came back from the Michigan authorities as they authenticated the vote. So look at this. Next slide is Trump votes. Every blue square on the next line is an individual precinct, and I think we start in Oakland County. Okay, Oakland County early voting. Every blue square or diamond in this case is an individual precinct. Now, what is this telling us? Well, it's telling us something really, 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 really interesting. Start on the left-hand side of the graph and then look at the bottom. You can see that on the far left dots, if you look at the bottom, those are precincts that went heavily Democrat in the total vote. If you look at those, that kind of bulge there at the very far left on the red line there, if you go straight down, you can see that those precincts went 95% Democrat. But even though they went 95% Democrat, they were in some cases 6, 7, 8% more for Trump than they would be for the straight Democratic ticket. That means that if you look at the left-hand side of the chart there, Trump does better than the straight Republican ticket in areas where he is least popular. But as the vote continues, if you look across the bottom line now, 20%, 40%, 60%, look at the 60% line. If you have a precinct that comes back 60% Republican, the Republicans win this precinct 60% to 40%. What that data shows is that the more Republican the precinct gets, the lower the support for Trump becomes. Trump is getting lower support as the precincts become more and more and more Republican. And that doesn't make much sense. But this graph doesn't make any sense. This graph should be a standard deviation, and it should match that horizontal line. In other words, more or less, people voting individually should vote for Trump in more or less the same numbers as the people that vote straight Republican, but that's not what it's showing. This is on early voting for Oakland County. Let's see what they did on Election Day. Hey, look at that. Now what he's done is he's put a line in there indicating the slope of the line. If you average all the blue dots, they fall upon that yellow line. And now look at what's happening, because this is the smoking gun. Starting from the left on the yellow line, okay? I'm going to move the camera so I can see a little bit. Starting at the left on the yellow line, what you see is that in areas, go straight down to the bottom, that went heavily Democratic, areas where the Republicans won 5% of the vote, Donald Trump did 10% better. He's above the curve in the least Republican areas. And when you get to 20%, Republican voting, then all of a sudden that line cranks down at a steep angle. And that line continues down, meaning that as you get a higher and higher and higher percentage of Republican votes, Donald Trump gets less and less and less of that vote as a percentage against the straight Republican ticket. Let's go back and look at the previous one. There's the slope for early counting. There's the slope for Election Day. And look at that. It makes a perfectly straight yellow line. Look at the yellow line. It's normal. It's what you would expect to see. But when the percentages of Republican votes hit 20%, then as the vote becomes more and more Republican, Donald Trump does worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. He is least popular in the most heavily Republican precincts, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let's look at what the rest of the guys are doing here. Here's Macomb County. Early voting on the left, Election Day voting on the right. You'll notice that the exact same thing is there, the same illogical, nonsensical thing, that he is up in areas that are most Democratic. He's way up there. If you look at the chart on the left for early voting, you're going to assume, given the demographics of the country, that the precincts with the smallest Republican votes are going to be the ones in the inner cities. But if you look at the ones on the far left, the blue dots on the far left under early voting, just look at early voting, look at the far left. What you see with those precincts is, yes, even though those precincts may have only come in with 10% of the Republican vote, he's getting 25%, 20% above what the straight Republican ticket means. Those mean that the poorer neighborhoods are going for Trump way above the line, way above what the average would be, which is the straight Republican down the ticket vote. And look at it again. Right when you get to about 20%, all of a sudden the line cranks down. And the more Republican votes come in, the less and less and less popular Donald Trump becomes as a function below the red line of the straight Republican ticket. Same thing for Election Day. Pretty much a horizontal line with normal distribution. But by the way, look at both of these things. The 50-50 Republican line is the red line. The blue squares are the actual voting districts. And if you look at both of those things, prior to that crank coming in, you can see that Trump is doing much, much, much better. Much better. In some cases, he's doing almost 40% better. If you look at Election Day on this one, it looks like he's 36, 37% above the straight Republican line. That means it's like something like 37% of Democrats have changed their votes for Trump only. And then once you get to about 20, 25% in the right-hand one, it looks like it kicks in around 40. But it's a sudden thing and happens, and then it goes down. And look at the slope. The slope is the angle of that yellow line. Look at the slope. It's a linear slope. And the slope on these two match that slope in terms of the angle. Look at the angle of the yellow line. There's the raw data. There's the slope data for Oakland County. There's the slope for Macon County. Let's look at the next one. Here's Wayne County. Sorry, that's not what the one I wanted. I wanted to come back to that. Here's Kent County. Now, on this one, they have taken both early voting and election day voting and put them onto the same graph. But you can see that Trump is way above the line in areas that have poor Republican turnout. And once you get to about 25, 20%, somewhere in there, all of a sudden, Trump starts to do worse and worse and worse the more Republican the vote gets. And here is the point. Look at the slope of that line. Not only is he doing more poorly, but he's doing more poorly in a perfectly linear fashion. And that linear fashion is consistent across all of those counties that were in question. So if you look at Kent County, if you look at Macomb County, and if you look at Oakland County, you see that he is doing better among the least Republican neighborhoods, and right around 20% of the vote, when 20% of the people start voting Republican, then all of a sudden he does worse and worse and worse. And any of the blue dots below the line are votes that go to Biden, because that red line represents the straight down the ticket vote. I vote Republican, so Trump gets that vote. Any blue dots that are below the red line are people saying, no, I'm voting Republican, except for Trump. So every single blue dot you see below the line is a vote that was switched to Biden, and the further below the red line it is, the higher percentage of the votes that were switched to Biden. So I'm obviously going to have to clarify these charts a little bit, but you get the idea. Now, numbers don't look like this. These lines, these slopes just don't suddenly do that. Even if there was a smooth curve, it does not make sense that as you got more and more Republican, Donald Trump would do worse and worse. But they didn't even bother to put a curve in it. They didn't slowly increase it. Whatever that slope is, that thing kicks in at about 20%. Once the vote count gets to be 20% Republican in whatever precinct it is, once it gets to be above 20%, they start taking votes away from Trump. And that means adding them to Biden. And the more Republicans are voting, the more let me rephrase that. The more Republican each precinct goes, the more votes are being taken away. So this is where it gets really cool. So there's Oakland County, Macomb County, and Kent County. Same slope, same thing, kicking in at the same place. Now, take a look at this one. That's Wayne County. There's no evidence of an algorithm being applied here. And if you look at that red line is where the Republican straight ticket vote is. And that means that in Wayne County, virtually every single one of those precincts were positive for Trump. They're above the red line. And almost all of Trump's gains occurred in the poorest neighborhoods. Best way to think of this is as you move towards the right, if you look at the bottom, it's 10%, 20%, 30% of the vote. On the far end of that right line is a precinct that votes 100% Republican. Far left end of the line is a precinct that votes 100% Democrat. And Trump is more ahead in the poorer neighborhoods than he is in the richer ones. You can see that the slope line here is that Donald Trump is doing 10% better all across the board. The line doesn't bend, it doesn't crank, it doesn't crack. It's just plain straight. That's what that means. What have we got here? Yeah. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that these electronic voting machines have an algorithm. And an algorithm that kicks in, and it kicks in at a specific point. It doesn't gradually kick in. It kicks in at a specific point, and once it kicks in, then it is automatically transferring votes from Trump to Biden, and the more votes Trump gets, the more votes get shifted. That's what that downward slope below the line means. The more Republican votes that come in, the more Republican votes get shifted. So of all of the counties where his total vote were stolen, most of the votes were stolen in the most Republican counties. And that actually kind of makes sense, because if you've got a lot more Trump votes than Biden votes, you don't really miss him as much. So the chance of this happening statistically is zero. There's zero chance of this happening statistically, none. And the beautiful thing about this is is that that slope and the cutoff point is virtually identical, not only in time but in space, meaning that in each one of these three counties, that correction comes in at the same place in terms of the percentage of votes, and it starts swapping votes in a linear fashion at the same slope. But not only does it take place in the same place, in other words, this county and that county and this county are all showing the same exact statistical anomaly going in the exact same direction, but it's also happening over time as well, meaning that the early votes are being cranked that way, as well as the election day votes being cranked that day. And that is just plain incontrovertible evidence. That's it. There's nothing else. There is no explanation for this. It is impossible. But there it is. So people talk about things like the software, Dominion, and so on. So what does this actually happen mechanically? This blew my mind more than just about anything. I don't know if you knew this or not. But when, again, I owe this all to these patriots, and they're going to get all the credit I can possibly stack on them. What these guys told me in this video, which again I'll link to, he said that going back to 2001, the first electronic voting machines were Diebold, and they came out in 2001, right after the 2000 election. And Diebold was the first, and then all of these other companies started getting into electronic voting, and Dominion is just one of them and probably the most popular one. I hope you're sitting down, because I think this was more disturbing to me than the statistical analysis. But from the first time that electronic voting was implemented in the first Diebold voting machines, provisions were made in the software to weight the vote. And what that means is you could make an adjustment in the software to say that if you got a vote from a black person, you would count that as 2 votes. The argument being that since blacks don't vote as often as whites, all you have to do is sample the blacks that do vote, and then you can extrapolate that number out. That weighting algorithm is built into all of these things. And so it's not like they have to add code to it. You can basically dial in the vote and say, well, this neighborhood is much more heavily black, so any votes that we get from this precinct, we're going to count as double. And any votes that we get from this white precinct, we're going to count as half. It's not one person, one vote. It's built into the software. Now, it can be turned on or off. I don't know what the case is with that, but the fact is it's built into the Diebold software, and it's built into all of the software. You can weight the vote. You can say, well, if it's a black precinct, since fewer people are showing up, this is the argument these criminals use, we're going to count every black vote as 1.3 votes. And every white vote we're going to count as 0.7 votes, just to make it fair. I've got this. I've got it downloaded. Everybody's got it downloaded. So the mechanism for doing the weighting is in there. It's not like you have to write new code for this. Basically, all you have to do is essentially tell the algorithm, once it gets above 20%, then assume that these are white votes and black votes, and start taking the votes away from the whiter it gets, the more votes you take away. It's built into the system. Yeah, there is no explanation for it. There's no explanation for it. And the other guy who's, I don't have their names, I will have it by next time. The guy who was doing a lot of the data analysis. The great thing about this video is they do their very best to be as fair as possible. Could this happen naturally? And the guy says, no, I can't say that. Well, what's the chance of it happening naturally? He says, I can't say it's 0% because there's always some fraction of a percent possible that something can happen, but the closest whole number is 0% chance that this could happen. So he said, well, how do we know that this isn't a natural occurrence? In other words, maybe this is just the way it goes. Maybe there is some kind of social thing going on where once you get to be in more and more Republican votes, more and more Republican areas, precincts, support for Trump goes down. And the guy said, yes, it's true that, theoretically true, he said, that hatred for Trump could increase the more Republican you get. He said, but that hatred wouldn't fall in a perfect line. The hate wouldn't be in a perfect line. The hate wouldn't be at the same slope. And the hate wouldn't be the same slope in the same place at different precincts at different times. There's no way that this is actual what happened. But these are the numbers from Michigan. This is not like, well, this is what we're estimating. These are the numbers that were reported from Michigan. It is physically impossible that this didn't happen. And it happened so systematically, and it happened at exactly the same rate, at pretty much the same cutoff point. Once we start to get 20%, once more than 1 out of 5 people start voting for Republican, we got to start taking votes away from Republicans. If we get to the point where 4 out of 5 people are voting Republican, then we have to take even more votes away from Republicans. And that's how they did it in Michigan. And I'd be willing to bet you, if you looked at the other data, you would find that is true everywhere else as well. So what does this mean? Well, if you saw my first firewall, and of course all of you did, then you understand that the first thing that's going on is this business of saying that Joe Biden is president-elect. And if he's president-elect, that means that any attempt by Donald Trump to do this legally would be stealing the vote. They've been prepping this for the whole 4 years. Will Trump leave power? Will Trump leave the White House if he loses the election? Well, what they're going to say is he lost the election. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. They're going to say that's why he loaded up the courts, that he could cheat himself out of, cheat the people out of the will of the people. And we're going to hear nothing but this. But I think we're going to find this kind of thing in virtually everywhere. And the most important individual piece of data here, let me see if I can go back and find it again. The one that really, really does matter the most is this one. This is Wayne County, where they did not apply the algorithm for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't own the particular election official in Wayne County, or maybe the guy just forgot to turn on the cheat button. For whatever reason, this appears to be a normal statistical analysis, the kind of thing that you would see. But the thing that's so striking about this is, again, I'm generalizing. I don't mean to generalize, but we have to speak in a language that the left speaks in. The further left you go on this chart, the smaller the percentage of Republican votes. In this country, in Michigan, that means inner city neighborhoods with a higher proportion of blacks. But the thing that's so incredible about this data, this uncorrupted, the one of the 4 counties that's uncorrupted, is that the poorer people get, the more support for Trump there is. All of those blue dots above the line are indicating that on some of those things, I mean, you look at some of those dots, the highest dot there, I see 60%. That means that in this relatively poor neighborhood that's getting maybe 7% total Republican votes, it's 93-7, but of the 7, many of those votes, 60% of them, are coming from former Democrats. Which means that, I think what it means is that if we see these patterns across the country, and I'm sure we will, it means that Trump won by a huge landslide. And that when I say the beauty, there's nothing beautiful about this. But what the software is designed to do is to say the bigger the landslide, the more votes we shift. Right? You can't just shift. This is why it looks like, this is why it's feasible. Okay? If they were to basically say, we're going to take 300,000 votes and shift them from Trump to Biden. Well, what if Biden wins by a big margin? Then none of this makes sense. The software is designed to look at what is happening. As we get more and more Republican votes relative to Democrat votes, we have to move more and more of them over. We have to shift them over. And so in some very primitive fashion, this is not terribly sophisticated, but in some fundamentally primitive fashion, this thing is feeding back. It is doing what the program is designed to do. The more Republican the vote, the more the votes shift. And as this data analyst, and I'm embarrassed I didn't write this guy's name down. They're going to get, they should all be given the Medal of Freedom, and yeah, I mean, he should run for president. But what this guy said, the data analyst said, is that there's no such thing as a computer glitch. You remember hearing they caught like 6,000 votes or 5,000 votes going from Trump to Biden? And they said, yeah, that was a glitch. Well, the data analyst said computers don't work that way. I'm saying that computers don't decide to go out for a smoke break, and computers don't find themselves busy texting when they should be counting. There's no such thing as a glitch. If votes were moved, they were moved because a parameter ordered them to be moved. That is evidence. And there is no other explanation. And in this video, he tries as hard as he can to come up with another explanation. He specifically says, well, what if Romney's right? I mean, what if Romney's assertions are correct? What if this means that the more Republican you get, the less support that Trump has? That's what the rhinos would argue. That's what the Lincoln Club would argue. They say, look, the more Republican you get, the further to the right you go along that line, the poorer Trump does among Republicans. Below the line. But as this guy pointed out, he said, yeah, well, if that were the case, this would look like, it would look like that. If Trump was less popular among Republicans, if the red line is down the ticket Republican and people who decided to mark individual ballots, I'm going to go with Republican state senators, I'm going Republican district attorneys, Republican, but I don't like that Trump, I'm going to vote against him. Well, if this were true, you would see all of the blue dots below the line, and this graph would indicate that Trump is less popular among Republicans than the straight down the party Republican vote. If Trump were more popular, then it would look like this. If Trump's popularity was this, now let me just tell you once again what this line represents. This line represents what it would look like if the people who vote straight Republican and the people who hand fill out every single candidate feel the same way. In other words, if almost every single Republican that fills out the individual people felt the way they did about Trump, then this line would be looking just like this. This would indicate that Trump is as popular as the straight Republican vote. This means that Trump is more popular than the straight Republican vote, and this means that Trump is less popular than the straight Republican vote. But the thing that you cannot square is that he's more popular in the less Republican districts, and that line is stable. And then once you get to about 20%, all of a sudden, Donald Trump becomes less and less popular. He's doing exactly normal, right up to about 25%. And then once you get to 25%, as the vote gets more and more Republican, he is liked less and less and less, and he's liked at a linear rate, and that linear rate of increasing hatred exists through election day, early voting, and in the various different counties, which is not feasible. You look at this line, folks, look at this graph, see where that yellow line starts to crack and go down. That is where the software kicks in. That is the parameter that has been entered for each one of these individual counties that says when the vote gets to this, now start turning this thing on. Now turn it on and take votes according to the algorithm. If the Republican vote remains below 20% of that precinct, then don't touch it. But if it gets above 20%, start taking votes away from Trump. And the more Republican it gets, the more votes you need to take, to the point where if it is a 100%, everybody voted Republican, that means take all of the votes and shift them. They're done. They're cooked. He's also said that when you take a look at counties or precincts that hand count everything and don't send it in to be machine counted, they said you don't see any of this evidence. It's nice. Here's Biden's support. Here's Trump's support. And if Biden's more popular in this area, he's got a nice standard deviation along that line, and Trump is not as popular, and he gets standard deviation along this line. But you don't see cases where Trump is doing this, and then all of a sudden Trump just falls off. It just doesn't happen. So That is the smoking gun evidence. And that is the issue. Now, as Cheryl points out, there's the smoking gun, but will Biden supporters give it credence? Well, at least half of the Democrats out there undoubtedly would give it credence, but they won't ever get to hear this story. Because here was what I think is going to happen now. And I'm quite convinced this is going to be the case, although I've been wrong before. I think what's going to happen is that they're going to take this kind of statistical evidence that is absolutely incontrovertible. And they're also going to take testimonies of people who've been told to backdate ballots and all of this stuff. They're going to take it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is filled with smart people, and they are able to read statistics. If I can understand this, then they certainly can. So what I suspect is going to happen is going to be a repeat of what happened in 1876. In 1876, I want to say it was Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that sounds right. In 1876, the national vote was considered to be so fraudulent and so compromised that they had to go to what the Constitution specifies in a case like this. The Constitution is astonishing in its elegance and its beauty. The Constitution basically says if an election, for whatever reason, is not resolved, if it's evidence of fraud or whatever the case, if it turns out that the electors can't vote because somebody rules it's just a fraudulent election, you don't vote again, the whole election essentially becomes void. And this is when the progressives start to lose their mind. But as it turns out, the Constitution has rules in favor of this. And what the Constitution says is, if the electors cannot elect a president for whatever reason, then they must immediately, that's the word used in the Constitution, immediately poll the House of Representatives. Now, you first would think, oh, that's bad, because the Democrats control the House. But that's not how the House of Representatives is polled. In this one case only, the House of Representatives is polled as the Senate. In other words, each state gets one vote. California votes one person. Rhode Island votes one person. Texas gets one vote. Each state gets one vote. Not a proportional vote, not a population weighted vote. The states elect the president, and so each state then gets to vote as if each state were an individual person. And right now, if I got the numbers correctly, there are 26 states that are red states, and there are 22 states that are blue states. Doesn't matter what the population is. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Thank God for Ruth Bader Ginsburg not deciding to retire under Obama. But that means that even with swishy John Roberts, who has a special place in hell, even if Roberts flips on this, then it's a minimum of a 5-4 majority. So the Supreme Court would then say, yes, the election is compromised. I got zapped. I don't know what to tell you. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? You hear me? Down for a couple minutes. I went black. I don't know how to explain it. It looks good on the recording. Hopefully it'll be all right later. Anyway, just to recap, since apparently it went offline for 2 minutes. Let me recap for those of you that may have been cut off. Here's what I believe is going to happen. I believe that this kind of evidence is going to be presented to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will rule that the evidence for voter fraud is overwhelming, and they will void either individual states or they might void the whole election. This has happened before in 1876, once, where the election was so illegitimate, so much evidence of fraud, that the electors basically said no. So the Supreme Court then followed the rules of the Constitution. In 1876, they said, okay, the election is essentially tainted irrevocably. We don't vote again. We have to inaugurate a president on Inauguration Day, which used to be in April or March, I think, but now it's in January. So the Constitution has rules for this. And the rules are, if the electors cannot certify an election and come up with 270 votes because one state or more states are irretrievably compromised, then the Constitution says that the electors must immediately, meaning that hour, once they realize they cannot come with a vote for the president, then it immediately goes to the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives votes, but they do not vote proportionally. Since the states elect the president, each state, for this only, it's the only time this happens in my understanding, each state votes one vote. California gets a vote, Montana gets a vote. And when that happens, if the election is declared void due to fraud, then the states are polled. Each state gets one vote. And there are, in my understanding, 26 red states and 22 blue ones, which means that Donald Trump is reelected. And the left is going to howl, and the streets they're going to burn their own cities down. And now you know why. They've been saying, now you know, it's 30-19. I like those odds even better. I think maybe the 26-20 is a result of the last election, but whatever. But Donald Trump will be reelected, and he'll be reelected legally. And this is the most important thing. Because I think I'm speaking for most of us here, not all of us, and this is not the kind of thing that makes me easy. But if there is not a legal way for Donald Trump to assume the presidency in the face of massive voter fraud, then I can't support. I know a lot. How do you, what happened if there was no legal justification? Donald Trump said there was fraud. I'm not leaving the White House. I would feel compelled to say, no, I'm afraid you are. What conservatives need, what law-abiding people need, is they need the legal and constitutional justification to fight against what is going to be the will of the people, because this is all they've been hearing until after. And I don't care actually anymore. I really don't. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to go to the court. The court's going to invalidate the election. It's going to go to the House of Representatives. The House is going to vote one state. Trump will be reelected. He'll become president. He will get the second term. All of the people who are now out on the streets voting or celebrating for Biden are going to be rather upset. The media will lose their minds. They'll call it a coup. They'll call it a dictatorship. They'll call it all of these things. That doesn't matter to us. If Trump refused to leave the White House, I'd have to back an attempt to remove him from the White House if there was nothing other than the fact that I assert that there's fraud. Because we're law and order people. But if it turns out that all of this is not only legal but constitutional, then now this one we fight on this one. We fight on this hill and fight and die here. The media has been making every effort to make it clear to the American people that they are going to determine who the president is. And that's why when you look at my American Pravda video, right below it on YouTube, it says, the Associated Press has called this election for Biden. Find out how robust fact-checking, blah, blah, blah. Follow this link for more information. Ironic, isn't it, that you can follow a link to show you that the Associated Press has called the election for Biden in a video that is specifically about how the media has no power to call the election at all. I found that kind of delicious and interesting. So here's what's at stake. First of all, I hope, I'm not saying I'm not planning on this, but I would hope, I'm sure I'll be disappointed about this one, that if this does go to the Supreme Court and this kind of evidence goes to the Supreme Court, I would like to think that we would get a unanimous decision in favor of fraud. If Sotomayor and Kagan see this kind of evidence and still say, no, there's no voter fraud, then they are hacks. And I would say the same thing about everything else. So I'm feeling much better than I did just even yesterday, because I have spent, as I said earlier at the beginning of this, I have spent 10 days, 7 days, 8 days, trying to find ironclad evidence that I can build an argument on, and so on. And I think what we're going to find is that this stuff has been happening everywhere. It didn't happen in Florida. Florida's got its act together. I think after 2000, Florida just really got it together. Florida got their votes counted on time. They got their votes in on time. There's none of this in the Florida data. Florida data is perfect. It's like, okay, these are Biden kind of counties, yes, and then these are Trump counties. There's none of this jumping. There's no irregularities. There's also something where, there's this very famous graph from Michigan or something where it's like it does this, and then there's the jump, and then it does this. I was gonna have to depend on that before. I don't have to depend on that now. This is much better data. But that curve with the jump for the increase in Biden votes, the fact checking on that says no, that's not real. That was a typo. It was a typo. And the person in charge of that particular precinct said no, it was just a typo. So I have a couple questions about that typo. My first question is, if it went up and that jump was a typographical error, you would think that as soon as the error was discovered, that number would come back down again, wouldn't it? If we're cruising along and all of a sudden, doing, what's all this about? No. We entered 100,000. We meant to say 10,000. Okay, shouldn't it come back down then? Most of the way down? It didn't. It went doing, and then it just kept on going. That's kind of odd. And what's even more odd is that Wisconsin shows the exact same kind of jump at the exact same time within an hour or two. So I guess that typographical errors occurred in completely different states at the same magnitude within an hour of each other. That's starting to, and those votes were never corrected out. Really? You can look at the incoming data from states where you see things that are not corrupted. And what's really interesting, I might have this. Hang on a second. I'll show you something that's really, really cool. And this is how just a small, minimal education can occasionally be useful. Where does that thing go? It's here. Just give me a second to find it. It's worth showing. And on the desktop. Where did you go? You go here. Sorry for the delay, but it's worth it. Believe me. Trust me. All right, hang on. I got to find this because it's great. So we all know the kind of thing I'm talking about. That step. Oh no. This is just where this is a typo. This is where Biden votes came in. Yeah, we'll see about that. Give me a second. I beg your pardon. I hate the dead air, but sometimes there's nothing I can do about it. So, come on now. All right, here we go. I'm trying to find it. I got a lot of images on the desktop because I've just been pulling data like crazy. Hang on now. I'll find it. Don't you worry. Okay, so here's one of them. I'll just put this in for a moment, and then I'll come back and find the other one. That's the weird step. And nope, because it's really, really cool. So you can all see what I'm talking about there. All of a sudden, that vertical line that you get to on, what is that? A little after 6 a.m. on November 4th, Biden's vote total, doink, jumps up by a significant amount. But Trump's doesn't move at all. Statistically impossible. Here's what I'm looking for. Okay, so what you're seeing here is statistically impossible. What you're seeing here is that they're saying, oh, a bunch of votes came in. Okay, swell. Yeah. So what? Well, a bunch of votes came in, and it's pretty much all for Biden. Really? How do we know this? Because if you look at that vertical jump, you'll see that the red line doesn't jump at all. None. Nothing but Biden votes, no Trump votes. Now, when they debunk this is the part I love. When you talk about this is how stupid these people think we are. When you look at the so-called debunking of this, they will show you this chart. And I will make this smaller just so you can see the scornful impression on my face. I'll just move over here. Now check this out, gangaroos. When they debunk that previous line, they'll say, no, see, there are lines that have many vertical lines in them. And all of those were resulting in Trump victories in Ohio, Montana, Iowa, and Kansas. See? Aha! But here's where we got them, folks. Look at, I'm trying to find the clearest example. Okay, look at Montana. Flat line across the bottom, you get to 2100, and at about 2130 hours, you'll see there's a big red jump for Trump, but there's at the exact same time a big blue jump for Biden. That's a new set of votes coming in. Follow that graph along a little bit, you'll see that every time there's a jump in the blue, there's a jump in the red. Anytime a new batch of votes comes in, some of them go to Biden, some of them go to Trump. And if you look at all of these other graphs that they're claiming debunks the thing, you'll see that there are maybe occasional delays, but every time there's a red jump, there's a blue jump. Maybe the blue jump is greater than the red jump. That means that more Biden votes came in that batch than Trump votes, but Trump got something. He got something. And what they're trying to claim is that in this particular case, I just deleted, of course, idiot. Yeah, here we go. What they're trying to claim is that this is real data, because all of a sudden Biden gets a jump, but Trump gets nothing. When that blue vertical line was counted, every single one of those votes went to Biden. Trump didn't get a bump at all. Look at the other ones. You'll see where every time there's a vertical jump, that's a sign of new ballots coming in and being counted. But you'll see that both the red and the blue lines go up at the same time, not to the same amount. You wouldn't expect that. You wouldn't expect that. You would think that some counties are going to go more red and more blue, but nowhere on the 4 examples on the right does Trump get a bump and Biden gets nothing. And that's how you know it's real. And that's how you know this isn't. So, I'm tickled. And I'm tickled for a number of reasons. One of the reasons I'm tickled, believe it or not, I talked to Natasha about this just before. Are you still getting me? Because I think it looks like I'm lost the feed on. Hang on. Am I there? Hang on. I'm here. Okay. I'm going to turn this down. I lost my own feed. Okay, good. So, I don't know, gang, but to me, this looks like the smoking gun. So now, I remember, you know what I found, and this is going to sound strange, but you're just going to have to take my word for it on this one. You know what I found? What I found myself feeling the most when I saw this evidence? I felt enormous relief, and I was obviously relieved at the thought that Donald Trump would be president. But the thing that I felt the most was that I was relieved that I wasn't wrong. I did not want to be wrong on this one. And I did not have what I considered to be factual ground to stand on, which is kind of why I went with the media bias thing first, because that one I know I'm right about. But I was looking for numbers that just were incontrovertible, and now I can go ahead in good conscience. And if it turns out, for whatever reason, that Biden is inaugurated president, it is still theoretically possible that he might have actually won, but there's so much fraud involved that that's clearly not the case. And it's not the case that he clearly didn't win. It seems likely that he didn't, but the fact of the matter is, if he's inaugurated an election that is so badly tainted that that he doesn't have the support of the country. And this is different. When Obama won twice, I had plenty of reasons to believe that I don't think Obama was a legal candidate. To be honest with you, I don't think he was legally able to be president. But be that as it may, there's no question that Obama won more votes than either McCain or Romney. And so while I hated Obama and everything that he was doing to the country, I love the country more than I love the country more than I despise him. And as long as the system is intact, then it's like, well, this is what the American people want. So I was never one of those people who said, Obama's not my president. Hey, Obama's the president of the United States. He won more votes than the Republicans did. I'm a citizen of the United States. It says so on my passport. I may not like him and his policies, but I don't get to say he's not my president. That's what the left said about Trump. If Biden had won this election fair and square, then Biden would be my president. And so would Harris. Even if she's a full-on communist, and she is, she would be the legally elected communist president of the United States. And I don't get to say that's not my president. I get to say, well, obviously our messages are so bad that we got a lot of work to do. But in this case, in Biden's case, it's not a question of, hey, he's not my president. It's a question of he's not the president. That's a big difference. It's a big difference. He's not my president. He's not the president. He did not win the majority of state electors that he, or at least the amount of doubt is extremely serious. And there's one more little ingredient to this toxic little brew, and that is of all of the voter fraud that we're seeing everywhere, all the glitches, all the misprints, all the typos, all of this, all of that, late ballots, all of it is going in one direction. Don't you find that the most remarkable thing? That's what I find the most remarkable thing. One direction, all of it. It's all going one way. So, we law and order people need a law and order reason to resist what is coming. And what is coming is the media driving the American public into an absolute frenzy. But if the law is on our side, then we'll stand. If the law is on our side and if the law is on our side, the Supreme Court rules and the Constitution is followed, the military swears an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States. If it turns out that constitutionally Donald Trump is elected to a second term, then the military will back Trump, and so will I. And I think this explains why we haven't seen him for 4, 5, 6 days. So anyway, and by the way, you'll find these same kind of irregularities if you look at COVID-19 data. You may notice my voice is kind of out, and so I will take a few questions. But I can't take as many as I would like. But to be honest with you, I think this is much more important than answering questions, the stuff that we just saw. So I'm going to start collating this. Start getting it into some kind of form. I hope to write the script tomorrow. Scott tells me to never promise when I'm going to deliver them, and he's right. But we will see a new one next week, and I hope it'll be early next week because I'm expecting to write this thing tomorrow. Yes, I will put the link up. Oh, let me put the link up now. Yes, sorry. And then I'll put it in the comment section. But I'll put the link up right now. And God bless this man. I mean, where did I put it? Hang on. I sent the link, so give me 1 second, sorry. Here it is. God bless this guy. I mean, honestly, I'm serious as I can be. I would vote for this guy for President of the United States in a heartbeat. I can't think of a better person for president. When you listen to him and you listen to the integrity and all the things he had to do himself, I deeply admire this man, and I deeply admire the other two guys who are working with him as well. Anyway, here comes the link into the comment section. Here's the video, and I'll link it below the posting on YouTube when we get that up in YouTube in a little while. So, be of good cheer. At the very least, we can carry on this fight against this guy, knowing that we're not victims of our own echo chamber, so on. People are saying there's a Trump tweet that I missed in caps. Can somebody just copy and paste that and put it in the comment section? I don't want to deal with Twitter. I have a hard time getting to Twitter. But apparently he said something in caps. So when he's in all caps, that usually means something big. Hopefully it will have something to do with this. If somebody could copy and paste it, I'd love that. There's always a 5 or 6 second delay between. Okay, here we go. Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide. Data analysis finds 221,000 Pennsylvania votes switched from President Trump to Biden. 941,000 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion voting systems switched 445,000. Oh, God damn. He's not putting out specific numbers. Dominion whistleblowers are coming out tomorrow. I saw somebody finally put up $1 million reward. That was my first thought when I saw the first whistleblower from Project Veritas. I said, why don't I'd be willing to start a GoFundMe campaign, and I think we should put up $500 million. Trump could put that up out of his own pocket, but that would be a conflict of interest looking thing, kind of thing. Mr. Subtle says there's a little weird stuff about Dr. Shiva, and that may or may not be true, but I don't know how you argue with the data. Oh, God. All right, so you know what? Guys, I'm not going to take a question. I'm not. I'm just gonna go with this information that came in real time. I'm sorry. I know everybody wants questions, and I'll try to get them next time. This guy, by the way, Shiva, is running in Massachusetts. So listen to this. Yeah, if every one of the 70 million people donated $10, there'd be $750 million. You're damn that right. So listen to what Shiva did. This is in the 2020 election. So Shiva is looking at the elections results coming in from Massachusetts prior to, okay? And he wants to see the ballot images. I started off by saying that a ballot, even a hand-filled ballot, is a piece of paper, and we think, oh, there's a piece of paper, and that's being archived. Yeah, but that's not what is actually being voted. That thing is being essentially photographed. It's being computer scanned, and then that goes someplace else to be voted, to be counted. And so that's the ballot. The image is the ballot now. That's the vote, is the image. It's not the paper anymore. It's the image. And since it's not the paper anymore, and it is the image which is going to a counting center, then they can do whatever they want to with those images, and they've been deleting them, and deleting them is against the law. And so Shiva said, I want to see the ballot images from the early voting or something like this. He demanded to see that from the Maine Secretary of State. He made a Freedom of Information request. So the Secretary of State from Maine contacts Twitter, calls them up, and with an election 35 days away, Twitter bans him for 21 days, bans him for 3 weeks. In the middle of an election campaign, Twitter bans him for 3 weeks, and the crime that Twitter banned him for was him saying, I want to see the ballot images. And the Secretary of State said, well, we got to do something about this guy, so they shut him down. Everybody, this video I've been referencing all night was a live stream kind of a thing. And so you see the comments coming in live, much as they do here. And as the comments were coming in live, everybody was saying, you got to get this to Trump, you got to get this to Trump. And I'm thinking, first of all, he probably already knows. Secondly, he's got other people on this. I mean, he's got some major people on this. I've heard somebody say, the idea that certainly the top of the FBI is corrupted, but I know many field agents in the FBI who are just embarrassed, disgusted, ashamed, and heartbroken over what Comey did to that agency. And to think that the entire FBI and the entire CIA and all and Homeland Security, the NSA, to think that they are all Democratic operatives is just nuts. You can make the case that the heads of those organizations are, but to say USAF Cyber Command is running the show, I've got confidence in the USAF Cyber Command, and don't you betray my confidence, USAF Cyber Command. In any event, I'm going to spend the rest of the time just speculating about what might happen now. So Trump goes to the Supreme Court and he's got conclusive evidence. Not only does he have these statistical models, but he's also got testimony, affidavits, witnesses, and so on. So Trump does this, goes to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says election's invalid, throws it to the House. They will say that the Supreme Court selected Trump. That's what they said with Bush. They said the Supreme Court picked Bush as president of the United States. No. In 2000, the Supreme Court said, you will have your electors in on the first Wednesday following the second Monday of December. One way or another, you're going to have them here. You don't get to keep counting forever. You don't get an extension. And that's when Gore conceded. So the Supreme Court didn't decide the election. The Supreme Court said, you've got to get your electors to Washington on time. You don't get to keep counting forever. But they're going to say that the Supreme Court selected Donald Trump, chose him, and that's why he had to rush to get ACB on and all the rest of them and the rapist, Brett Kavanaugh and all the rest. So they're going to do all of this, and they're going to continue to tell the American people that this thing was stolen, and on and on and on. I don't want to deal with that right now because there's a lot of variables there. I want to talk about the long-term picture here. If Trump and the American and the USAF Cyber Command has conclusive evidence of this, not only does he get to be president, but then you get 4 years, or at least 2 years. No, you get 4 years. You get 4 years of a Justice Department to go after all of these people. And I think, I'm not happy about this, but if you ask me about what I would do, I would dangle immunity in front of everybody. And I would dangle immunity until there was nobody left to rat out on. I would say you are looking at 20-year prison term right now. You're going to go to federal prison for 20 years for interfering in this election. However, if you testify against the person who told you to do that, then we'll give you a suspended sentence, or maybe we'll give you 2 years or whatever. But I would dangle that and dangle it and dangle it and dangle it. And so how high up does it go? Well, in this video, he pointed out that, we know who some of the people who own Dominion: Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Rupert Murdoch, Carolyn Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch, as you may remember from Fox, has got a burr about Donald Trump, and so does Carolyn Murdoch. And so you're wondering why Fox kind of glitched out, to say the least. And the thing about Fox is that influenced the vote, because every single conservative in the country was watching one network. Everybody. The 70 million people that voted for Trump were watching Fox, every one of them. No, none of us were watching anything else. And that meant that whoever controlled Fox could control the turnout for the conservatives. So, I've said before, where does this make sense? I did it in the firewall. Well, Disney owns this and this and this and so on, but the bottom line is somebody decided to ruin Fox News permanently. Fox News has disappeared. No one is watching Fox News anymore. Their ratings have cratered, 80 or 90% down. And Tucker will go someplace else, and so will a few other people. But again, you have to ask yourself serious business questions. What would cause somebody to destroy a business like that? You don't destroy a business like that for ideology. You just don't. And when you get to the level of income for people like Murdoch and stuff, you probably don't even really do it for money. You don't destroy a business for the money. The only way you would destroy, the only way you would be willing to destroy Fox would be if the consequences to you were so high that if you didn't, you might go to jail. So I guess what I'm saying is when it became clear that okay, so Dominion is doing all this voter fraud stuff and they've got to get Trump out of office because now the investigation's starting to get close to the real people. Basically, Murdoch says, if I have to destroy Fox in order to get this election into Biden's hands so this will all go away, then that's what we'll do. And I think that's what they did. I'm never watching Fox News again, ever. And I'm going to have a real hard time watching. Tucker wasn't a part of it, but Bear, Cavuto coming in, interrupting the press secretary, saying, well, we're not going to go there. Okay. Probably be a good thing for me to close on. We gained 1,000 members in the last week. Now, a lot of that was the concern and the despair and the anxiety and the fear over what appeared to happen on election night, and a lot of that also was me just finally saying it's time for us to either put up or shut up. So we gained 1,000 members. And so I just want to say this. There's still going to be people watching this on YouTube. Not only did we gain 1,000 members, we also had large numbers of people making a one-time donation. So that's enormous. It's made an enormous difference. It's going to allow us to do an awful lot more. But let me just say this. The real value of things like this are not so much that, gee, it keeps the Bill Whittle message going or anything else. Here's what it means. I am incorruptible. Well, first of all, I'm an honest person. I'd rather go out of business and sweep floors than lie to you or lie for anybody else or get their or take anybody else's money. But it doesn't hurt to know that there's no Chinese overlord that is either threatening my job or offering me billions of dollars. I work for you guys. I work for 3,400 people now, and the only way I can get fired is if I do something egregious enough to piss off 3,400 of you, seriously enough to piss you off seriously enough, so that whatever goodwill I may have built up is burned off. And I'm not going to do that. On the contrary, now that we have some more resources, we're going to just keep doing more and more and more. But I think this is one thing that Donald Trump and I have in common. Of all the things that Trump has ever said, I think the most simple and elegant one was whenever he would be accused of corruption or whatever, he simply would say, I took $1 billion a year pay cut to be president of the United States. I didn't start out like Hillary Clinton with a couple $100,000. Next thing you know, I've got $150 million mysteriously. I took a pay cut, a huge pay cut, to do this job. And when you've got a guy who's giving up $1 billion a year just to be president, it's very hard to buy a guy like that. And so, so there you go. But one of the reasons that this firewall took so much longer than I wanted it to, and they're coming, they're going to just keep coming, is because I could not be wrong about this. And I didn't want to be the guy saying, no, there's voter fraud, if it turned out that there wasn't. I mean, I thought the evidence was real good, but as you start looking at all these claims, like the ones that they're just filling in ballots. No, actually they weren't. They were just simply marking ballots. They're reading a list of what the person voted for and the other person's marking it in. And that turned out not to be true. And I thought, my God, if I stand on any one of these rotten planks and it falls through, then my credibility's gone. Not just with the left and so on, and not just with you, with me. The reason I feel so good right now is that data. I don't know what Trump's claiming, but he's not going to give specific numbers unless he knows that. For me, that data had to be ironclad. I can't afford to be wrong on this one. I can afford to be wrong when it comes to who's better, Kirk or Picard. I'm not wrong, but that's not the end of the world. But this one I had to be right on, and I know that the people who support the work we do here, and the large numbers of people that joined, know that that's my kind of imperative. But look, I guess what I'm trying to say is this: if it turned out that I became convinced that there was no voter fraud, then I would have to get in front of all 3,000 plus members and say, here's the evidence why I think there was no voter fraud. And that wouldn't be fun at all. But that's what I would have had to do if it turned out that that was what the evidence was showing. But it's not. When people say, how could they be so stupid? The answer is, why would they think differently? Looks like I'm disconnected. Hang on. Looks like I'm disconnected. Anyway, isn't that interesting? Okay, well, if you're watching on YouTube, our bandwidth connection on OBS through to Twitch has gone on to 0. And, it's back now. Now it's back. Just back. Anyway, what I was saying, I'm just recapping. It'll be on the YouTube video. But I've never been cut off before. Twice now, it's just plain stopped. Never had bandwidth issues really before. So anyway, all I was saying during that last time we were out is just simply this: because I work for you guys. This is a strange thing to have to say, but because I work for you guys. It's a burst water pipe, Dave Wellman for the win. Because I work for you guys, if I became convinced that there was no voter fraud and that Joe Biden had been legitimately elected, I would have to tell all of you, I'm sorry, it looks like he was legitimately elected. And that's what I'm seeing. And if it cost me, half the membership or most of it or all of it, then that's it. The only... the whole thing for the time I've been doing this, I was writing essays, and stuff on eject, essays are essays. But once I started getting into the real politics thing, I just remember thinking to myself, as long as I am convinced it's true, if I see evidence that something is true, that's good enough for me. If it turns out I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong, but I'm not doing anything that I'm not sure is true. So that's what you get when you buy the membership. You get a guy who will tell his membership, no, it didn't happen. Turns out it did. But that's I just wanted you to know, and I wanted all of you to know how much I appreciate it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, usually looking at the numbers, there's still a significant number of people that didn't do that, and all I'm saying is we're doing our best to fight these people and their $34 billion, and we're winning. So what the world could look like is this. Trump has the evidence. Supreme Court throws it out. Goes to the House of Representatives. They vote, one state. More red states than blue states. Trump is reelected. The media screams that he stole the election. Large numbers of the population believe it. They take to the streets and start rioting. What's different this time, though? What's different this time is that this time, especially right after Trump got out of the hospital, this time I'm seeing Trump supporters in caravans with flags getting in the left's face and not just taking it. This time, yeah, exactly. Tim Morris got it exactly right. This time we know that we outnumber them. I've never seen conservatives fired up, on proud, openly, like, woo. And so this could really genuinely be the fall of Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower collapsing with tears in our eyes kind of thing. It really could be that. And we've been talking about that forever. I never expected to see it, but it really could be. If he's got compelling evidence, and there are people who are coming forward under oath, then we may not only have Trump reelected, we may also get a chance to put in jail the people that did this, and even better than that, we may get fair elections. And if they've been doing this on this election, it makes you wonder how many other times they've doing it. And I had to tell you, there was a time there, and I may still do it. I may still close the series on this. It's actually kind of an admonition, and it's this. Why did they think they could get away with stealing the vote? Well, why wouldn't they think that? Why wouldn't they think that? They tried to steal the vote in 2000. We didn't do anything. They stole it for Frank in 2008. We didn't do anything. And here's the thing I was going to say, and this will make your blood run cold, folks. They murdered Epstein in his cell, and nobody did anything. First-degree murder. He hung himself. Really? Yep. Don't you have security cameras on him? Yeah. Well, let's see the footage. Looks like the video cameras just kind of went down then. Oh, really? Yeah, some kind of glitch. They just weren't working for that period. And what did we do about that? Nothing. We did nothing. They murdered a guy who had real dirt on Bill and Hillary Clinton. And I'd never bought that whole, Hillary Clinton murdered people before. I believe it now 100%. It was starting to reach a statistical impossibility, but now I saw it with my own eyes. This guy was murdered in front of our eyes. Well, he was murdered in the darkness while they closed the door, and then when they opened the door again, looks like he accidentally hung himself. And we didn't do anything about it. And here's the other one, folks. They told us 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We flattened the curve. We now have numbers from the CDC that says that if you're under the age of 40, you will not die from this disease. It's just statistically getting close to the number of people die hit by lightning. It's certainly less than the number of people killed by car accidents. And they told us, no, you're going to continue to be locked down in spite of the evidence. And we did it. We just took it. And that's not something I'm proud of. But then again, when you're facing your own government, there you go. I think one of the things that filled me with the most happiness in the last 24 hours, and it's been a good 24 hours, and I think it's going to start getting better, is when I heard that Florida governor is trying to get laws passed that say that if people are rioting outside your building or your house and they're destroying your property, you have the right to shoot them dead. Glenn Reynolds said on Instapundit, he said, every civilized society in history has laws like that. There we go. So the best case scenario is that we could really actually, it'd be kind of like, here's a new cancer therapy. Really? Yeah, I know you thought you were about to die in a week. It's experimental, let's see. And then you find out 3 weeks later that it's gone. So if none of this happens, if things break the other way for whatever reason, then they will have stolen the government, but they will not have stolen the country. and we're the country. Trump supporters of the country. You see, these idiots actually think that all of this enthusiasm is about Trump. They really think that we are like this Hitler-like cult, like all of the enthusiasm and the passion for this guy is for him. It's got essentially nothing to do with him. It's got to do with the fact that he is the first guy in living memory to stand up to this ongoing destruction of our liberties that happens when societies become too prosperous and too secure. People come, 50,000 people don't show up in the middle of the Nebraska plains because they love Donald Trump. They show up because they love the country and they love everything that it's based on. They love all of its ideas. They show up because they love the country, and they show up to support the guy who is actually fighting for that for the first time ever that I've ever seen in my adult life. And he is the guy with all of his flaws. He is the only one who understands how this thing works. He's the only one from the pop culture. He's the only one who understands how it works and has played it and is fighting about them. That tweet about Dominion, you don't make a tweet like that unless you're feeling pretty good, because he's been in there quiet. John Galt for the win. It's us thereafter. Trump's just in the way. That's one of the most profound things I've ever heard. And the guy who did the actual data analysis on those graphs I showed you with earlier said something I thought was really, really important. This is this patriot who did the data analysis on these election issues, and he said when Dr. Shiva said, "Do you have any closing thoughts?" And he said, I want to say his name is Don. I think it's Don. Anyway, I'll get it right. He said, "Yeah, I do. I do have a closing thought. My closing thought is this. This is not voter fraud. The voters didn't do this." I thought, my God, that is a profound, 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 profound observation. And that needs to be just bellowed. This isn't voter fraud. The votes went into the machine. It's control fraud. It's behind the scenes fraud. The voters didn't do anything fraudulent. People went and voted for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, and they did it with most of them did it with the idea that this was going to be how we determine things. But since we don't know what goes into the machine, we can't check it against what comes out of the machine. But it's not voter fraud. The voters did what they're supposed to do. Voters went to the polls, and whoever did the counting betrayed not only the Trump supporters, and this needs to be said too, by the way, although not many of them will see it. It still needs to be said. They didn't just cheat Trump supporters. They cheated every single person who legitimately voted for Joe Biden, and they cheated every single person who voted for Joe Biden who believes in this country. They ripped those people off too. They destroyed everybody's confidence in the system, and they did it on purpose. And that is the way out of this nightmare that's going to happen with minimum damage. There's no way to get out of this without people just losing their minds. But the way you get out of it with minimum damage is to basically say, listen, these people stole the election not only from Trump and Trump supporters, they stole it from Biden supporters as well. They stole it from the American people. They stole it from all of us. If we lose faith in our ability to determine our own leadership, then everything comes down to who's got the force and the power. So they stole the election from all of us. And I think I did a Bill Whittle now just a day or two ago that said, write Donald Trump's victory speech. The media has called Joe Biden president-elect in order to make you as enraged as you are now. What they've done is they've given you a lollipop that you wanted very much, but wasn't theirs to give you. They gave you the lollipop specifically so that when somebody took the lollipop away from you, you would be feeling like you're feeling now. That's why they did it. They did it. They gave you a lollipop that didn't belong to them so that you would cry when it was taken away. And that's cruel and gives you a good indication of who you're dealing with here. So why don't we have free and fair elections and a free and fair press? And why don't we have discussions about the actual issues? And if your ideas are better than yours, better than ours, not only will you win elections, you'll win my vote. But yes, it turns out that this software, as John Galt points out, that this Dominion software was used in all the swing states. And I think, folks, if Joe Biden is inaugurated, I am much, much more comfortable with this than I was a few hours ago. Because whether they get away with it this time or not, we are on to them. And what we need, what conservatives need, is we need to be on the side of the truth and the law. And now I am 100% convinced that we're on the side of the truth and the law, and that means that if Biden is inaugurated, then this is simply a major setback, and you have battles and you lose some and you win some. And if that's the case, then we just keep on fighting. We keep on fighting anyway. But I don't think they're going to get away with this. And by the way, last comment here, it's my first announcement of the last comment, probably my fifth. But you can often tell things about people. Oftentimes you'll see people with like an avatar name or something, you know, and it'll be like some liberal whose, you know, avatar name is one nasty bastard or whatever, usually something worse than this. People can't help themselves when it comes to these kind of things. They're very, very deeply built. So when passwords come out and things like that, you always kind of create things that come from your subconscious. So it's interesting to me that they called this software Dominion. Dominion, noun, sovereignty or control, man's attempt to establish dominion over nature. Or two, the territory of a sovereign or government. But dominion, I'm quite sure, is from the same root as domination. And it is the sense of this dominion is we control this. We have dominion over it. And to use the word dominion in election software is about as telling an evidence as anything else. Dominion. Is that what you're going to call this? Dominion? Really? Not citizen or honesty or accuracy or, yeah. Dominion. Well, this is the great liberal failing. Liberals believe that they're smarter than everybody. And they may be smarter than you, and they may be smarter than me, but they're not smarter than everybody. And they've been told that they are for so long that I think they may have gotten themselves in a real heap of trouble. Dominion. Wow. And there was one last little thing you do. Where did it go? I was talking about Dominion. Oh, anyway, today could be a good day, and could be the beginning of many, many good days. And we're going to keep the work coming, and we're going to keep it coming as fast as we can. For those of you who've joined us recently as supporters, if you're watching this on YouTube, we're very grateful for the new members, and extremely grateful also for the people who chose to make a one-time donation. We had a couple of those donations for $1, and that means as much to me, and sometimes means more to me than anything else. So, yeah, the we have the United States has been the victim of a sneak attack 3 times in its history, and I lived through 2 of them. Um, I lived through the sneak attack on 11/3. I lived through the sneak attack on 9/11, and I missed the sneak attack on 12/7. But in each case, in the days after the sneak attack, is filled with nothing but despair and confusion and horror and disbelief and so on. But in the previous 2 sneak attacks on this country, the people that did the sneaking and the attacking were wiped from the face of the earth. Imperial Japan is gone. Tojo did not survive 1 year after the war. Al Qaeda's gone. Bin Laden's gone. They always make the same mistake. This is ultimately the cycle with America. Always attack us too early because they are always convinced that our good nature and our minding our own business and our decency and our honesty, they see that all as signs of weaknesses. And like the Japanese and like Al Qaeda, they think that if they hit us hard enough, we're not going to fight back. And they don't understand, no, that's not how it works. Hit us soft enough and we won't fight back. You hit us hard enough, and all of a sudden something happens. And I fear that all they have done is awaken a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. But of the 2 quotes that I'm reminded of are one from a comedian, I think it was an Asian comedian, who said, you don't want to piss the Americans off, because if you do, they're not going to come at you with 1,000 bombs or 10,000 bombs. They're going to come at you with 2 bombs. I like the sound of that a lot. And of all of the things I think I've ever heard about this dynamic, it goes back to the Civil War. I've been trying to source it. I can't find it. I'm sure it's in the Civil War trilogy, but that's a pretty big haystack. But Shelby Foote tells a story about a Southerner and a Northerner speaking at the beginning of the war, and the Southerner is saying that they're going to clearly win the Civil War because Southerners are outdoors and they're used to hunting and they're used to riding horses and they're better soldiers and they're filled with flame and passion. And the Northerner said, no, you don't understand. He says, I know my northern people. They're like a giant boiler filled with cold water, and it takes a lot of heat to get that thing up to steam. It takes an awful lot of fire and heat to actually boil that water. But when you do, the power that it generates is overwhelming. And I've always thought that was the best description of America that I've ever heard. It's a boiler, big boiler filled with cold water, and the amount of heat it takes to get it to a boil is almost inconceivable. Most people from the outside, like these frauds or like Al Qaeda or like the Japanese, felt like nothing can bring that water to boil. You can put as much fire on it as you want to. It is never going to boil. Well, they're wrong about that. So, there we go. We're going to be here one way or another. Very, very grateful for all the increases. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't either become a member or made a one-time donation, I'm not going to lecture you anymore or anything. I'm just going to say the fight is real and it's going on, and this is the front lines. And if you'd like to go over to BillWhittle.com, either become a member or make a one-time donation. The main benefit of membership is not helping us put the videos out. The main benefit of membership is meeting the other members. That sense of community on the website is everything. So if you're feeling like you need people that you can just kind of say, I can't believe this crap, you'll run into people who will agree with you. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you for joining us again this evening. Thanks to our new members. Thanks to our longtime members. We'll be back next Thursday. We'll have a second installment on the ongoing series about the stolen election, which will also eventually get to big tech, and it'll get to vote by mail, it'll get to COVID, all of that stuff. It's just so huge you can't put it all in one place. So we'll be getting those out for you right now, and we're motivated and on fire here, and I know you guys are too. We will prevail. We will prevail. And of that, I've always been certain. So, baby, we're going home. And as for the rest of you, I will see you next Thursday right here on the Stratosphere Lounge. Thanks. Bye-bye.